This is
A-bas-le-ciel.
Leading Beatles Conversation with
Eisel Mazar.
66 WNBC.
I'm going to read and reply to a comment sent to me on Patreon from Theo. Theo is not just a fan or a supporter, he's really a super fan. Sometimes I quote myself and I can't find the quote, and he knows what video I'm quoting. I'm like, where's the video where I said this about this topic or something? So Theo knows my material really well, and one of the reasons for that is that he has been doing some kind of archive work, I'd say. He's been looking around a lot at what's been going on in the vegan movement, and he's been kind of piecing together links to different articles by different vegans, and different websites and different videos and so on. My best girl Melissa is sitting here just off camera next to me. She can chime in anytime. Anyway, so Theo writes, quote, I don't know the timeline of your journey into vegan activism too well. I know you've had an affinity for charity ever since you felt betrayed by parents indoctrinating you into communist ideology. Sometime around when you were studying Buddhism, doing humanitarian aid, etc., etc. So I'll read the rest of this paragraph. This is an interesting point. So he's saying that I've had an affinity for charity work, and this is somehow linked to growing up with parents who were communists and my own rejection of communism. So I had a longtime friend and frenemy called Philip, who you know some stories about, babe. And Philip grew up with Christian parents, and he felt that he was indoctrinated into a form of Christianity that he despised. And they were not, I don't know if anyone can be called a normal Christian, but they were not quite normal Christians, it has to be said. They liked going to Nigeria, not just to do charity work, but because they liked the really hardline, extreme form of Anglican and Protestant Christianity they got out there. They didn't find Christianity harsh enough, or biblical enough, or whatever you want to say. And I think probably homophobia and so on played a role in that. So that was where they felt comfortable, was as being white missionaries in that part of Africa. Anyway, but I said to Philip before, when he was complaining to his own parents, I said, possibly if we had switched families at birth, if he had been raised in my family and I would have been raised in his family, ironically, it's quite possible I would have accepted my parents' ideology just because the charity aspect meant so much to me. I think that was really almost an instinctive thing, from childhood forward for me. I can't say that was something I ever thought about. Like, you ask me, why does charity matter to me so much? I think for many people it is. I don't know if that's for 10% of the population or 50% of the population. But, the basic concept of doing the best you can, trying to help others. To give you an example, how did you feel, babe, when you were a kid and you saw someone who was mentally retarded, saw someone or interacted, saw someone on the street, like not on the news? You know what I mean? When I was a child, I felt very strongly when I interacted with mentally retarded people, including people like born with Down syndrome. I'm talking about severe forms of retardation, not some minor thing. I really wished I could help them. I felt this terrible yearning to want to try to help them, and the powerlessness of knowing I couldn't, and also knowing that, in terms of what your parents and teachers, you're told by your parents and teachers to keep your distance, and not without reason. You, as a little kid, it is probably dangerous for you to interact with or play with mentally disabled people. So, that, for me, I think I had that out the gate. I had that out when I came out the box. I came out from day one. I don't think that was something taught to me. Now, on the other, so look, other kids also, if they had parents who were communists, would have responded to and questioned other aspects of the ideology, not just the charity aspect. But from my perspective as a child, very clearly, the validity of communism really stood or fell with the same claims to validity the Catholic Church often uses. So I remember there was a really crappy mainstream movie, The Da Vinci Code. Okay, so I saw like 5 minutes of that movie while washing dishes and changed the channel. Honestly, I'll tell you the truth. If I watched that movie, I'd have no shame. But I remember that was on TV in some circumstance like that. And in at least the movie version, the main character confronts this representative of the Catholic Church, and he sort of says, your church is built on lies. And the representative of the Catholic Church, he's a cardinal or a deacon or something, he's some reasonably ranking person, he says back that his church washes the feet of the poor and feeds and houses the homeless, and this is their claim to legitimacy. Now, I remember I just laughed at that at the time. It was just ridiculous. When you donate money to the Catholic Church, do you want to know what percentage of it goes to feeding the poor, and what percentage of it goes to housing, clerical scholars and priests and nuns in some kind of luxury? And I'm not hating. You just can't kid yourself. What are you paying for? Are you paying for the Pope to live in luxury, or are you paying for the poor to live in poverty? If you wanted a charity, it was devoted to helping the poor. It wouldn't look anything like the Catholic Church, right? In its design or function, what have you. But that was always striking to me. And then only when I was a teenager, but late in my teenage years, when I was in university, I read that book by Karl Popper. So the particular book by Karl Popper has a tough title. The title is The Poverty of Historicism. A bunch of his other books have catchy titles, just not that one. And there, for the first time, I saw someone openly talking about the extent to which Catholicism and communism really had things in common, in terms of their appeal. And that resonated with me too. I could see, this is a really meaningful critique of both, frankly. Anyway, something that as I've said to you recently was kind of a family secret also, was the extent to which my father was drawn to Christianity, and for maybe 10 years of his life really believed in Christianity. I always thought that was very telling, that the same people who were seduced by communist extremism, not moderate communism, are seduced by Christianity. And I don't think I ever told you this story, but I met one professor in China, and she didn't admit it to me. She admitted to my ex-wife, and then I heard from her, that she actually had a period where she had lost faith in communism, and she briefly went over to, she considered formally converting to, but she started going to church. She was being seduced by basically American-style Christianity. And she said directly, because it made the same kind of promises, it had the same kind of appeal for her. So she wasn't sleepwalking at that. It wasn't like somebody else's analysis. So there is an interesting kind of parallel there. But again, I started this by saying, in all due humility, that kind of charitable instinct, I think, was so important to me that it's quite possible, if I'd been raised by Christian parents, even crazy Christian parents, even specifically my friend Philip's crazy Christian parents, that I would have found so much value in the charity side of what they were doing that I don't know. I don't know what I would have done with it. I don't know what direction I would have taken that in. But, the claims to charity on the part of communism are pretty paper thin. I've never heard anyone really try to justify, for example, the American war in Vietnam as charity. To really justify, why are you bombing Vietnam as charity? I've never heard someone really try to justify the American war in Afghanistan as charity, which is another parallel thing. And the communists had the same problem. The communists also invaded Afghanistan. They invaded and conquered Afghanistan. People now forget. They had their own history. So that they overlap in that specific example. And to look at any of those, but that's only one example, but to look at any of those episodes in the history of communism in Russia or in China, it's very hard to give a charitable reading to them. So that really is like a pun or a play on words, but, hey, I'm not joking around for no reason here. So it's an interesting point Theo is opening with here. So again, coming back to Theo's letter to me, he says, quote, "I know you've had an affinity for charity ever since you felt betrayed by your parents indoctrinating you into a communist ideology, and I kind of see that the other way around. Because the charitable instinct was so strong in me, there was this tendency to judge communism against charity, against the social function of charity. Are you trying to help other people or not? And keeping it all the way real, remember, my father had real kind of rage and sorrow. My mom, too. That whole generation from the Vietnam War, specifically the Vietnam War. Shout out to Tana Mongeau. Tana Mongeau's father also totally ruined by the Vietnam War. A lot of people were in that generation. And, for my parents, and for a lot of people their age, their response to the Vietnam War had nothing to do with charity. It was real hatred and rage and sorrow. It was a real sense they wanted to destroy the United States. They wanted an angry fist, And I didn't see the world... I think they were wrong to see it that way also. I think they were both incorrect and morally wrong to see it that way. But you have to realize a lot of those people got involved with left-wing politics, and they didn't have any charitable motives, and it wasn't at all like the way I felt as a child, seeing images of poor and starving people on television. As a child I never saw that in real life. But in real life you'd see maybe homeless people on the street, see people living in poverty in different situations. But you see, when I was a kid, babe, this may have been true for you too, there were a lot of images, especially of Ethiopia. Ethiopia was the kind of sterling example of poverty, maybe for your generation, instead of Haiti. So you would have been pretty young when the earthquake in Haiti happened, or something, this kind of thing. I'm just giving you examples.
When I was in high school, my choir did a tribute concert.
Oh, yeah.
And, raised money. Yeah.
But anyway, the image of poverty and starvation, and then the question of what do we do from here. And in my case, so my family was poor back then too. I told you, I just talked about this with my mom, and my mom was way more down to earth about it than my dad. It wasn't like I was looking at those questions from the perspective of someone born to wealth and privilege with a lot of options. It was looking at it as someone, that, again, my family got more and more money as time went on after that, like while I was in university kind of period. Really while I was in university. But anyway, but I was looking at it as someone who was basically, poor and powerless in Canada, but poor by Canadian standards, and wondering, what can I do? What can we do? And, the other question, which definitely links to veganism, why doesn't anybody else care? Why am I the only person, why am I the only person moved by those things, which obviously a lot of children go through that, one way or another, whether it's accurate or not, whether or not the things that move you really do move a lot of people or not. So he says, sometime around when you were studying Buddhism and doing humanitarian aid, you started a Tumblr and writing articles on veganism. So, look, these things overlap. Back when I was involved in Buddhism and doing the direct humanitarian work, I identified as strictly vegetarian. I didn't use the word vegan. I'd never really seen or heard the word vegan around. I remember the first time I ever heard the word vegan. That's another story I just won't tell in this video. In a sense, it's like I say all the time, I understand people not even thinking about veganism, not being motivated to be vegan, if you're actually finding the cure for cancer, or if you're actually deployed in a war zone in the army, if you're doing something you're so passionate about. So back then I was strictly vegetarian. I refused to buy leather, for example. I did own leather. I would end up buying secondhand leather or something. I was trying not to buy leather. I believed that dairy and eggs were immoral, but I would eat something like a croissant that invisibly contained those things. And obviously in Cambodia, not all that often, unless you live in the croissant district of Phnom Penh, Cambodia. But anyway, but actually, indeed, the fact that I was engaged with Buddhism and doing humanitarian work, that made me... It was a counterbalance to say, it's like working on the cure for cancer. You got something you're passionate about, and that's about making a positive difference in the world. And so I wasn't really thinking about veganism that much, although my own values and choices had already taken me 90% of the way towards veganism. All right. So Theo continues, quote, I grew up veggie in a hippie corner of Wales, debating with friends who were farming, fox hunting, giving me the push to go vegan at 15. Outdoor exploration with my school, paid for with newspaper round money, i.e. meaning he sold newspapers or delivered newspapers. Going to Borneo and Malaysia, helped to build bamboo bridges over rainy season tributaries, seeing the rainforest and living with peasant rice farmers. Going to climate camp and Earth First gatherings at 17, moved closer towards revolutionary socialism. Okay, so this is interesting. This is his kind of ideological path as a child and as a teenager. He says he's been on the road ever since, living in solidarity camps with disenfranchised communities on the end of proposed road schemes, coal, mineral, or extreme gas extraction plants, Irish travel and refugee camps. Okay, so living anarchism and nihilism with people, he says. All right, well, sounds like a tough road to hoe. All right, so he has a family of dogs he travels with, he's describing here. I'm skipping ahead a little.
Gypsies came to our hall door. They came brave and boldly, oh. One sang high and the other sang low. The other sang a raggle-taggle gypsy, oh. It was upstairs, downstairs the lady went, put on her suit of leather, oh. And there came a cry from around the door, she's away with the raggle-taggle gypsy, oh.
He had more time to read and reflect on philosophy. And, okay, he then says, finding vegan YouTube, this Patreon, and the Philosophical Vegan Forum have all been a major boost to my confidence with articulating the need for veganism. My knowledge about what can be done is still limited in terms of real-world activism. I'm mainly encouraged by the freaking practices of guerrilla gardening, gleaning, and mapping or organizing urban apple foraging, to foster community and spread awareness about a broken, unethical food system. Okay, The most value you've brought to the vegan movement, he says, so I'm quoting him, the most value you've brought to the vegan movement has been critique so far, but I think that will change as the different approaches become crystallized for people and user-friendly collaborators. Well, it is interesting. I mean, just earlier today, what is the value of what I'm doing for veganism? So earlier today I watched that video about my response to Jordan Peterson, for example. So that's not my most successful video by any stretch of the imagination, but more than 5,000 people watched that video to date. And, I heard it today while we were getting dressed, and I'd forgotten what I said in that video. I'd totally forgotten the video. And I just thought, wow, that was a really great video. It's said a lot of things I wasn't even expecting to hear myself. It was kind of a genuinely unexpected approach to it. I mean, what's the value of being a radio talk show host? I can definitely say that when I listen to my own material back like that, and I've forgotten about it or something, I mean, not if it's a video I really clearly remember. Some of them I do, obviously. But, obviously it's a lot more meaningful than watching Larry King live. It's a lot more meaningful than the stuff I watch from the Young Turks or the other kind of would-be radio hosts of our generation. So for sure, there are different standards to bring to bear, and ask the question of what is any of this stuff work? You've had a big impact on clarifying ideas for me, and I hope you will find your activist group and more or better vegan ones, and we can all inspire each other with real world progress. He says he's linking the videos that are the most important to him. Good. That's interesting.
Bird is waking outside my window. Bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, ciao, ciao. Directs my senses into the sunlight, for there are things that I must do. Wish me luck now, I have to leave you. Bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, ciao, ciao. With my friends now, up to the city. We're gonna shake the gates of hell, and I will tell them, we will tell them, bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, 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 that our sunlight is not for franchise, and wish the bastards drop down dead.
Oh, he says here he agrees with another YouTuber called Flemface about how it's easier to find veganism when you're already breaking with your own culture. Okay, this is doubtless true, and I think that's also true about my engagement with Buddhism and a lot of other things. I think Melissa has been reflecting on that in some ways, because we've just gone back to visit your family and looked at a lot of things in your basement, see what you grew up with. But I mean, fundamentally, I was never comfortable in Canadian culture, period.
Yeah, I was never comfortable in the culture that I grew up with either.
Right. So it's interesting.
Yeah, I always felt distanced from it.
I mean, you could state it as a question. Do you become vegan and then break with the cultural norm because of veganism? Or is it that you're someone who's already broken with the cultural norm and then finds it easy to engage with veganism? And for some people it's going to be both or something, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have to be all one or the other. But no, I mean, I was really disgusted with my own culture. I could go over some of the things. And of course, it relates to particular political events prior to 2001, relates to all these things. But sure, I don't know what it would be like for someone who loves, being an American, who loves living in Texas and is loves and is totally comfortable in that culture, and watches football games and everything else, and yet they're vegan. We see that with the health-based vegans and so on often enough. But in terms of ethical veganism, I mean, once you're an ethical vegan, once you see the world in those terms, even just from the ecological perspective, how do you still watch football the way you did before? Yeah, I mean that sincerely. I don't mean that as a taunt or an insult to someone. Like, what is the meaning of your life now? Watching football and, doing those other things you used to do. Because from my perspective, ethical veganism, even if you just think about the ecological aspect, you think about the millions of animals dying in cages all around the world. And now here you are at this football game, even though you personally aren't eating ribs at the football game and everyone else is. It must suddenly make the other things in your life seem, meaningless, and not just meaningless, but pernicious, as part of the destruction of the world as opposed to saving the world, as part of a meaningless, self-indulgent, and destructive life as opposed to a meaningful and helpful one. So, again, and I'm not saying this to insult her nor to flatter her, but you can compare that to someone in Texas like Fully Raw Christina. Fully Raw Christina obviously could never fit in Texas in a million different ways. And then, she is Texan. She lives in Texas. But it's not surprising she ended up where she's at, I guess, from that perspective. So, no, I see that, sincerely as a really interesting piece of the puzzle. And maybe that's also why it's so difficult to organize vegans, right? Because you got a bunch of different people, and each one is kind of fragmented away from their own home culture, or rebelling against it, or acting out against it in different ways. But we're as different as I am from Fully Raw Christina. We're as different as I am from Charles Marlowe. But even we're as different as I am from Gary Francione. I mean, think about that guy. I mean, Gary Francione, he obviously is incredibly uncomfortable with the culture he's a part of, Gary Francione. You get that rage and that sorrow in everything he does, just dissatisfaction too, just rancor, but he's a salaried professor. I don't know if he's retired now, in many ways he's a member of the establishment and so on. So, and yeah, getting any 2 or 3 of those people to cooperate seems to be impossible. Even though I have so much in common with someone like Gary Francione. We can't even agree on how to pronounce his name. So currently, the guy writing to me, Theo, says that he's working as a raider. Pardon me. What a word to mispronounce.
What? I'm just saying, life's short. We shouldn't take things for granted. Are you saying granite? Well, yeah. It's granted! With a D! Take things for granted. Did you actually think it was... Jesus Christ, Rick? What are you, a boulder rock person? How long have you been saying that wrong? Oh, you like that, huh? I bet that really blows your mind. I mean, yeah, it's kind of great. You want me to erase it? What? You can do that?
Working as a waiter and taking care of a dog in the middle of Wales. I didn't even know he was Welsh. I didn't know he was from the UK at all. I always imagined Theo was an American. Trying to get back into organizing. Okay. He's trying to go back to university to study ecology and geography. Trying to get master's. He's talking about other projects he's looking into doing. So look, and the other things he's listing off have to do with his own career and lifestyle. And I mean, I guess I can get into this in a separate video, but for all of us, I mean, that's ultimately what it comes down to, is the number of hours in a day, and how you can make any of these aspirations, to save the world, compatible with the challenge of keeping a roof over your head, or providing a decent standard of living to your own kids, if you have kids, or any of these other things. I remember, so there's a saying in Buddhism, this is in Mahayana Buddhism, but they say, it is in some moderately ancient text, but not the most ancient text in Buddhism, where it says, practice the Dharma as if your hat is on fire, as if you're wearing a hat that's on fire. And, a lot of religions have that spirit of, like, the world is going to end, so work really hard and devote yourself to this or whatever. I mean, veganism, it's weird. I don't feel that the world is going to end. I feel that the world is bad and is getting worse. But I mean, it's an absolutely horrible cosmology we live with as vegans, ethically and ecologically. And, I do still ask myself that question every day, how would you live your life if you were trying to save the world? I have a daughter. My daughter's 4 years old. I do prioritize spending time with my daughter. I do burn the jet fuel to fly from Canada to France and spend my 15 days with my daughter, and all these things. But sure, when we're looking at these options, so he's talking about getting a university degree and being a tree surgeon, doing something linked to ecology. I went to, back when I was a political science major, I went to and I took classes in the Department of Ecology at another university. Not worth telling the whole story, but it was a ton of work. It was taking the subway for so many hours across town, and then you get out and take a bus to go from one university to the other, just to be in this Department of Ecology. And I was trying to talk to people there, because I really thought at that time I should maybe switch my major from political science to ecology, or something like political ecology. I was wanting to make it, and of course when I got there, department's a joke, the courses are a waste of your time. You know how it is. You know how universities are. We've done a million videos talking about that. But my problem is I have no delusion. It would be a wonderful delusion if I thought that getting a PhD in ecology could make any difference in the world, even on this YouTube channel. I don't think if I got a PhD in ecology it would even help this YouTube channel in any way. I don't think it would help the vegan world anyway. If I got a PhD in ecology, I don't think there's anything I could do that Gary Francione hasn't already done, or even that Gary Yourofsky hasn't already done, without having a PhD in ecology, you know? And I don't think they'd teach me anything I couldn't learn, you know. Okay, I don't mean that. They would teach me a lot of things, but they wouldn't teach me what I'd need to know to move beyond what people like Gary Francione and Gary Yourofsky have already done. So both of us are people now who are looking at more higher education. We had a video on it recently, looking at whether or not we should become lawyers, go to law school. But then you look at that and you contrast it to, you know, going to get a degree in culinary arts, getting a degree in baking, getting a degree in pastries, working in a kitchen, rolling out bread, and ask yourself what can really be a platform for making that difference in the world. Anyway, it's heavy. So we were laughing and joking around a lot before we came on camera. But I mean, that it really is the burden. I mean, you know, I've got to say, it's the burden that I've lived with all my life. I really do feel that way. But veganism gave me a coherent framework and a lens to understand it and express it much better than before. Because Melissa was exactly like me in this. Before I was vegan, I cared way more about never owning a car. And by the way, I still never have owned a car. I still never have driven a car. Right? And then after I was vegan, you see that kind of thing in this much, much more meaningful, quantitative framework. You know, and I remember, like, some of my ex-girlfriends, when I first got with them, they were really hyper about never using a plastic bag. And I said to them, do you want me to show you the stats? Do you want me to show you what percentage of the human waste stream, that's what people call it, the human waste stream, is reusable plastic bags? Do you want me to show that, and the difference between using a reusable and a disposable? Do you want me to show that? I can get you that now. And in some studies, you know, the reusable plastic bags cause more garbage than the disposable. It's a really near thing. It's like, okay, and now do you want to look at the difference between, you know, meat versus tofu? This kind of thing. I'm not saying veganism's the only, you know, ecological or ethical cause, but veganism was both the ineluctable conclusion of those questions and those misgivings, and it was also something where once I switched into veganism, all those other questions, you know, made more sense. It precisely, in the strictest sense of the word perspective, it put all the other problems in perspective. You could see what was big and what was in fact small but close to you, you know, in contrast to things that really were huge but perhaps, you know, more remote.
A-bas-le-ciel.
Anyway, so Theo's type of stuff, but I don't know what Theo's engagement with anarchism is. I mean, I just say to give a bone to the anarchists. Obviously, people who question authority want to spend time with other people who question authority. I mean, you know, ultimately, one reason to identify as an anarchist is to meet other people who have that ground in common with you, right? Definitely. You know, and you know, I think, anyway, I can't say we all want that, but a lot of people would really value that, and that's part of what we're doing as vegans too, putting up the thing.
Up the provost, that's what he said. And from this farmer's son, better men had fled, with a rifle on his shoulder, a timer and a fuse. Long may we remember Commandante Francis Hughes. Long may we remember Commandante Francis Hughes.
I think this is my dopest live stream ever.
Yeah. Well, I was just gonna say in response to that.
Sure.
Yeah. Obviously there was a lot to talk about in that video, but yeah, I can definitely remember just having this like crisis before I went vegan. I guess probably a year before I went vegan. I was just thinking, like, what is the solution? Like, how can we all, like, return to an agrarian lifestyle? Can, like, you know, like, I remember, like, commenting, like...
I went through that same shit.
Yeah, I was like,
really?
like, what is the solution? Like, you know, how can I possibly justify how much waste I produce, like, or what I'm a part of every day? But yeah, I was just gonna say that did play a huge role into me becoming vegan.
Well, I was gonna say, you know, I had the videos talking about anarcho-primitivism.
Yeah.
But when you said that, like, you know, well, should you go live in a village or should you go back to primitive? But no, I mean, I really went through that, and like, anyone who asks it as a question and really researches the answer, I think is going to come to the answer no, it doesn't. But I mean, you know, that also overlaps with the thing with communism and left-wing politics.
Yeah, like,
right? Yeah.
Like live in a
Right.
co-op city, like
Right.
what Theo was talking about.
Right. So I just mentioned that's something I talked about both with my blonde girlfriend and with my ex-wife. My ex-wife who's not blonde. Most of you know this. But, you know, my ex-wife, because, you know, she was really learning what communism is all about with me, too. Like, you know, some way she knew, some way she didn't know. But I can remember explaining to her, you know, like, the knock-on effects, even when you do this commune, this kind of special ecological village, it's exactly what happens with the religious communities that cut themselves off. So, you know, normally Mormons, Mennonites, Amish, those people, right? But when they cut it off, they get into a situation where, you know, the value of the wages they're paying people to work on the farm, they can't buy shoes with anymore, you know, and it's like, well, we can't make our own shoes. Sorry, I mean, I know it sounds ridiculous, but actually what happens in terms of those interactions with the outside society is parallel to what happens when you cut off Cuba, and Cuba tries to become an agrarian, communist, commune-driven society, but then they have to buy things like aircraft carriers or airplanes. You know, they can't make airplanes themselves. So, you know, in the same way that they struggle with shoes, you get these really interesting, you know, things that they. Anyway, sorry, I'm sorry, this is not a coherent explanation of that problem, of why that occurs and how it occurs. Yeah. But I remember talking that stuff through with both of those girlfriends. And one of the reasons I talked it through with them, obviously, both in response to ecology and communism and even Buddhism or whatever, there was always that question of not quite getting back to the wild, not quite getting back to the forest. There's actually something useful that was said in a Buddhist essay I once read, a Buddhist academic essay, getting back to Arcadia. So I just made Arcadia, yeah, so here I'm just showing her the dictionary definition. But yeah, Arcadia, I mean, I think the point the essay made was Arcadia is not paradise, right? Like Arcadia is not heaven. Arcadia is not the Garden of Eden, but it's an idealized, you know, village or something. It's some kind of perfect village. So in all those things, and then in ecology, I mean, by the time I got involved with ecology, seriously, I was too, and I'd already been through that. I knew Arcadia was not the solution. I knew that cutting yourself off from the real economy to have a miniature economy was not the solution. And even, you know, yeah.
This came up in talks about, like when we were watching A Privileged Vegan, or listening to their podcast, about having what was it, not food security, but like, you know, having
food sovereignty, they called it food sovereignty, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, like how is it possible that it could be any better than what we have today as a system for, like, you know, like humans have never been able to access healthy foods and never been able to have this healthy lifestyle before, so it can't possibly be better to have like a community of people in Canada like producing, you know, can of oranges, can of bananas, can of like so many items that you take for granted.
Which would also be a problem in the Soviet Union, as you know. People in the Soviet Union couldn't get strawberries, couldn't get bananas.
Right. So and as you say, don't have enough money to buy shoes or whatever.
Yeah, it's anyway. But I mean, my heart goes out to those people. In some ways, they're asking the right questions. I think the problem is they're not sincerely asking the questions and not looking for answers. You know how it is, especially on the left wing, maybe when people ask questions, but they really just mean it as an insult or approach. It's a question along the lines of how dare you, but it's not, you know. Yeah, I see a lot of that, but that's maybe a natural instinct to think that there's this village you go back to. It also comes up in terms of anarchism. I've done a couple of videos explaining why I'm not an anarchist, but I've never started with this aspect. But, you know, so this is something me and my ex-wife were on the same level about, we really understood it. It was funny when you talk to people who are anarchists who believe that when you went to a tribal level or small village level, that somehow nobody was bullying anybody around. It's like, no. You've never studied what it's like being in a tribe. You've never studied what it's like being in a small village. No, like the level of bullying and coercion and authoritarianism can be much worse. You know, it can be unbelievably horrible. You know, and then, you know, the tribal chieftain can be the bully, or, you know, it's all this kind of terrible thing. But yeah, so I just say that was also an interesting contrast between a kind of Arcadia view of that. But just my ex-wife, just because she was an anthropologist, she knew about that stuff, you know, and she had enough experience with that she didn't see those things with rose-colored glasses on. So yeah.
Yeah, I've seen short clips on, you know, I guess you don't know this because you don't use Facebook like how most people use Facebook. You just look at the Facebook messages.
I just use Facebook like email. I just send email through Facebook.
But sometimes when you're scrolling through the news feed, you just see clips of videos and you're like, okay, whatever. But yeah, I saw one that was praising village in somewhere in Africa. Sorry, I really don't know where it was, but where like women were in the role of, like, the authority role was played by women, and like it was just, you know, praising this type of village, and I was like, why would this be any like why is it inherently better just because it's with women? Like it's like the end of the Michael Moore video, like where he's movie where he's saying like, what's the secret?
Really
having women in charge.
Yeah, right.
That's
right,
like
right.
what? Like women don't bully you?
Yeah.
Like women can't possibly be.
Like women can't start wars and then not fight in them.
Yeah.
And that'd be another factor. It would be just the separation from the horrible reality of war in your tribal leadership. I guess they'd start the wars and then not fight in them. But yeah. Anyway, and also, I mean, you know, did they build the pyramids? Because, you know, I say that all the time about all the cultures I've studied. I say about the Cree and the Ojibwe, but I'll say it about the Laotians. I say, look, you know, this is a culture. I study it. It's important to me for this reason. This is a language. I study it. It's important. But don't kid yourself. I'm not trying to claim these people built the pyramids or built the space shuttle or built the atom bomb. It has to be important for some other reason. It has to be worthwhile and important for some other reason. Anyway, so Mike on Raw wrote to me and said, an interesting perspective you were calling a failure. I hope you realize that some of the blame of your failure is you. Sure. But in more ways than one. You set up a vision of what success would look like, but you are either unable to drive situations to meet that vision, or your vision is blown was available at this time. Perhaps you are simply insufficiently patient. Well, I don't believe that, but okay. Reasonable point he makes, but no, I don't think patience is the issue. I myself have some very high expectations and have a vision that I'm working towards, but I don't see it happening quickly. The vision is also not quite focused, but it is more focused than simply making YouTube videos and walking around with statement t-shirts on. If anything, I find moving veganism forward is extremely challenging. But I've seen veganism change a lot in 2 or 3 years. And no kidding, I have been a part of that. I mean, obviously the part of veganism I see is the part most influenced by me. But still, I've seen a lot of change. Some things have changed just because the ideologies were unstable and fell apart. But, you know, all kinds of different reasons. Okay. He says there are many vegans trying to move the movement forward, but so many have their own specific chip on their shoulder that drives them. It is making it feel like wrangling cats. Yet we keep doing it. We keep trying to move forward. We don't look at it as failure. We just look at it as a challenge. You know, a lot of people say that kind of shit. I think you got to look at failure as failure. Let's just keep it real. Let's keep it real. Of course, like, failure is relative to a line. Like, if you miss a goal, it's relative to a goalpost or a line. Of course it is, but failure is failure. Come on, I don't think there's any point. Anyway, you may find it interesting, he says, I continue, quote, you may find it interesting that I've been working with the Humane Party, a political party in the USA that promotes personhood for animals. I don't know if this is a long-term avenue for my focus, but it's getting me talking with others, thinking about the same things, and recognizing a wide variety of perspectives. The party is getting things in place to build a Humane National Committee. Okay, so he's got a link to that. Sounds better than nothing. I mean, what are you going to say, man? Vegans are a group of people who know the change they want to make in the world, and they even know how they want to make it. And yet we're so, fractious and fragmentary. We're so divided into mutually hostile camps that it's seemingly impossible to get 5 people together who agree on these basic principles and who can get a movement going the same way those movements to, make seatbelts mandatory got going, the same way Mothers Against Drunk Driving got going. People had to set aside their differences. I'm reaching out to these people again and again because fundamentally my reason for being on YouTube is to use YouTube as a platform to organize that kind of real-world political activism. For 3 years now, I've been asking people, so what do you want to do? What are you willing to do to make a positive change to the future of the vegan movement in the next 5 years? Right? I've been asking that question for 3 years now. So I'm running out of time before those 5 years are up. And I have to face up to the reality that although, the profound fissures within veganism that exist, they should create interesting debate. But I don't even have people to debate with.
A-bas-le-ciel.
Hey guys, broadcasting today has been, in a word, impossible. We announced that we were going to do the broadcast just 24 hours in advance. from an airport. The airport had a fabulous wireless connection, but it turns out our hotel room did not. We got out and scrambled, and this is being recorded right now from a cafe. They're just closing down the cafe. Coffee shop's closing down for the night. You might hear some of the dishes going in the dishwasher. I can hear them clearing off dishes. So I had a lot to say in today's broadcast, and the broadcast is being cut short. Be that as it may, I wanted to say a few words about the political purpose of my YouTube channel itself and of why I'm on Patreon. You can click the link below this video and join Patreon for $1 right now. I openly discuss my efforts on Patreon as a failure. And several other people who are Patreon supporters wrote back to me saying, well, come on, you shouldn't talk about it as a failure, especially given that it's only a failure relative to a preconceived goal you established. So fully 1 year ago now, I talked about that on YouTube. My feeling, my belief, my conviction is that the exact opposite. I think it's really important to set goals and then be honest with yourself when you fall short or when you exceed them, right? So I just went to China in order to learn Chinese. How much Chinese did I learn in 7 months relative to my goal? How much did I accomplish? How much could I have accomplished, etc.? I think those are really important things to be honest with yourself about. And any goal you miss, of course, is relative to some standard. A goal is relative to a goalpost. Whether you do well or poorly at something, of course, relies in part on definitions that have your own selection, of your own election, and that to some extent they're based on cold hard facts of reality. Like if you flunk out of chemistry in university, that's not a goalpost you set for yourself. There are going to be standards like that you come up against too. But sure, in this case, I openly talked about goals and aspirations I had for the channel, and many of those I haven't reached, and now there are things I want to do that I can't do. So I was emailing people earlier today and talking to people on Twitter about vegan conferences, vegan political events I could attend or I would like to attend. That is exactly the sort of thing I could do if I was making $400 a month on Patreon, and I'm not. So I can't and I won't. Maybe that's an oversimplification, but sure, I'm massively limited in terms of what I can do now coming back to Canada from China in terms of real-world vegan activism. We're both right now unemployed. I just finished doing a 1-year contract as a university professor in China. During that time, I did earn more money than I spent, and I did have a bunch of crazy expenditures, like flying from China to France to see my daughter. But be that as it may, I basically saved up $5,000 US during that time. I've now spent a bit of that too, because on the trip back from China, I had various misadventures, so a significant amount of that got spent up. And my father's death, my father left me a gift, legally speaking. It wasn't an inheritance, it was a gift at the time of his death. That was only $25,000 Canadian, which is not enough money to do anything except stave off poverty. Right now, during this time of transition, when I get back from China to Canada, look for a new job, look to enroll in school again, rent an apartment, which we've just done. So that's what's going on with us. So yes, the money matters, and the donations, the lack of donations, are going to have real-world outcomes. One of the other obvious ones, you saw me, I was just talking to my mom about this. My mom was actually really hyped to see me publish a children's storybook I wrote. I wrote this storybook in Chinese. Just search the channel for the word storybook, and you'll find what I'm talking about. But I wrote a story in Chinese. I translated the Chinese into English. Other people translated it into Japanese, German, Russian, a few other languages. We've got Dutch coming up next. Dutch translation is coming now. It's a great story. Sorry, I'm praising my own work here, but it's a great story for children and for parents to sit down and read to their children that deals with some of the core ethical questions of veganism, but in a way that's not gross or inappropriate. I would love to have that illustrated and published and on store shelves. And the reason why that hasn't happened yet now is money. Now, over the last year, there were other reasons. My girlfriend already knows this. My girlfriend's sitting here off camera. We worked with an artist who flaked out. That was the other thing that happened. So money today is the reason why it's not happening now. I inherited a lot less money than I thought I would. I thought I'd get $50,000 plus. I thought $50,000 and change or something like that. And I didn't. I got $25,000 Canadian, which is I think less than $20,000 US. And I have a 4-year-old daughter. I have responsibilities in life, and I got to worry about getting myself into my next job. But yeah, I wish I had the financial margin or security to just get that book illustrated and published, and I don't. And the artist I had before who flaked out on us, keeping all the way real, I really thought that if we worked with her, we could do like a crowdfunding, Kickstarter type thing and get it rolling without too much money up front. I had confidence in that, but she flaked out, so it didn't happen. So look, I would like to actually read out and discuss the message I just posted as text to Patreon. I posted a sort of short essay, which is a long discussion of what's been going on with this YouTube channel, about what the political aspirations of the YouTube channel are, etc., etc. I mean, it's not about what I see as the future of this YouTube channel. It's about what the future of this channel isn't. You know, it's about the doors that have been closed and the failures, and then what direction that funnels us into in terms of our lives and aspirations, how we're going to move forward as vegan activists, and how we're going to move forward in terms of using this platform, using the internet generally, to try to make something positive happen, right? I want to say, for the purposes of this video, again, anyone who can, click on and read that article. It's a separate thing. I've reached out to and tried to collaborate with so many people from so many different walks of life. Because, as I used to emphasize in videos going back 2 years and more, I think the fundamental unit of political organization is having a group of maybe just 10 people who can really work together, create a foundation, engage in lobbying, make something happen. In Canada, that's partly even just for legal reasons. You got to get people together who can sign as the signatories to a board to create a charity, create a legal entity, start receiving donations, start lobbying, start making things happen. You need that group of friends, 5 or 10 people who trust each other and can sign checks for the same bank account. And if someone asked me fundamentally, why did I ever become friends with Charles Marlowe, formerly known as the Vegan Cheetah? That's why. Why did I ever reach out to and interview the Light Twins? Or I was interviewed by the Light Twins. Whatever. We had a conversation. We had one long, great podcast, still worth listening to, in my opinion. You know, and those guys later kind of went crazy and broke up, and they've gotten into all this strange spiritual stuff. Why did I meet and interact with these people? Why did I ever reach out to someone like Kenya Mania? Why did I reach out and try to cooperate with someone like Vegan Gains? Or even worse, ask yourself. I mean, each of these people is deeply flawed in a different way. Very different way. You know, some politically, some religiously or spiritually or what have you. I'm reaching out to these people again and again because fundamentally my reason for being on YouTube is to use YouTube as a platform to organize that kind of real-world political activism, right? And when I'm talking to somebody like the Light Twins, of course, maybe I'm going to recruit them. We're talking to someone like Kenya. Maybe I'm going to be able to really collaborate with them. Maybe not. But maybe even my reaching out to them positively, they're going to introduce me to the person I can really work with. I can really make something happen with, right? That's good practice in life, whether it's business or politics or what have you. So I've done that again and again and again for about 3 years now. And I used to talk about it more. I just don't talk about it anymore because I don't like repeating the same message on YouTube. Move on to other topics. But here I am now 3 years into this, and I don't have that circle of 10 people. I don't have that circle of 5 people. I don't even feel like I have 3 people. I feel like I'm totally alone, aside from my girlfriend. But, you know, of course, my girlfriend counts, but there's a sense in which, you know, our relationship is so close that it can't be counted as a political one. In any case, it can't be. You can't be counted as a colleague quite, because you're more and less than a colleague both, right? But sure. So I'm not all alone. I have my girlfriend with me, and she'd love to do any of this stuff, this activism. But that's all I've got. So that is a failure. Yes, failure is relative to goals you set for yourself, or for goalposts or definitions you set for yourself. But I think it's really important to set and recognize success and failures when whether they're financial, aspirational, political, or otherwise. So I still say this stuff to people. Recently got someone who was in the audience just now. We had a guy in called Truth Crab, and other people freaked out about that, including Quest. Other people were really surprised when I was talking to him and I found out that he wasn't vegan. I said to him, well, look, man, the only reason I'm here is to meet other vegans and try to get organized, right? Try to work for the future of the vegan movement. I'm just keeping it real, you know. So, and people were, in that context, people were shocked. But I was like, look, I've got no reason to talk to you. You know, if you're not vegan, if you're not part of the future of this movement, if you're not part of the solution, I don't really even care if you're part of the problem. You know, this is not what I'm online for. So another quip, to quote myself, that struck me today. Earlier today, we listened back to a video I made, I don't know, long enough ago that I've forgotten all about it, which was my response to Jordan Peterson, thanks. That's what she's here for. Jordan Peterson, where I commented, it's a really interesting video, to be honest with you. I'd forgotten what I said in that video to such an extent that I found it really interesting and surprising. But I commented, vegans are a group of people who know the change they want to make in the world. And they even know how they want to make it. And yet we're so, fractious and fragmentary. We're so divided into mutually hostile camps that it's seemingly impossible to get 5 people together who agree on these basic principles and who can get a movement going the same way those movements to, make seatbelts mandatory got going, the same way Mothers Against Drunk Driving got going. People had to set aside their differences. I'm sure some people probably got involved with Mothers Against Drunk Driving because they were just opposed to people drinking alcohol for religious reasons. And other people got involved because they had a relative who died in a car crash and it had a strong emotional reason. There would have been all kinds of diverse motives brought together by the mission statement of Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Any of these examples I use, different movements to try to get rid of cigarette smoking, educate people about cigarettes causing cancer, etc., right? We have that hurdle to get over. And some of us are only in this movement because of the heart attacks, and some of us are only in this movement because you're into adopting bunnies and stray cats. We got all this diversity. But yeah, for me, for 3 years now, I've been asking people, so what do you want to do? What are you willing to do to make a positive change to the future of the vegan movement in the next 5 years, right? I've been asking that question for 3 years now. So I'm running out of time before those 5 years are up. And I have to face up to the reality that although, the profound fissures within veganism that exist, they should create interesting debate. But I don't even have people to debate with. Still this day, only one person ever collaborated with me on the book review videos. That was Mod Vegan. I still don't even have people who are looking at me across those fissures interested in debating these things for the future of the vegan. I don't even have people who are interested in cooperating with me on the purely ideal and idealistic side of the equation. Talking about the ideas, talking about the philosophy and the political philosophy and the way forward for this movement. I don't even have collaborators of that kind. Much less do I have 5 or 10 collaborators to get organized, make a movement, make something happen in the real world. So that's a failure. And now, me and my girlfriend, party of 2, we've got to look forward to and asking ourselves the question, should we enroll in college, learn how to bake bread? Should we get involved in food services? Should we get involved in feeding vegans and feeding people to be vegan? Try to make something positive that way as a platform for the future of the movement.
A-bas-le-ciel.